Now, I don't know anybody who's ever read the Bible, who's read the story of Cain and Abel, and hasn't wondered, man, what's the deal with that? Like, they both offered a sacrifice. They both offered an offering to God, right? Abel offered from the flock. He was a shepherd. Okay, he offered from the flock an animal sacrifice. Cain was a farmer, and he offered the produce of the ground. Okay, and it says there that God had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain's offering, he had no regard. And you read that and you're like, that doesn't seem right. That seems kind of unfair. Like, what's going on there? And the Bible doesn't give us as a direct of an answer as we would like to why that was the case. But if you read between the lines, you can actually, I believe, figure it out. So if we go to 1 John chapter 3, verse 12, it actually talks about this passage. And in 1 John 3:12, it says, we should not be like Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brother's righteous. So notice what it says about Cain. It says there that he was of the evil one and murdered his brother. Well, how are we to understand that? Well, don't forget, John is interpreting Genesis. In the previous chapter, Cain and Abel's in Genesis 4. In Genesis 3, Satan had come and deceived Adam and Eve, right? In Genesis 3:15, I believe it is, or 16, God tells the serpent, I will put enmity between your offspring and her offspring, talking about Eve. He shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel. It's the first gospel in the Bible. It's a promise that God gave actually to Satan, that a descendant of the woman would come who would conquer who would defeat Satan by crushing his head. Okay? But he also gives a picture that there will be two types of seed in the world. There will be the seed of the serpent and there'll be the seed of the woman. In other words, humanity from that point on is going to be characterized by basically two different kinds of people. Those who fundamentally follow Satan and those who fundamentally follow God. Now, most people out there ain't explicit Satan worshipers, but what are they doing? They're doing what they want to do without respect to God. Well, guess what? That's what Satan does. Satan does what he wants to do without respect or submission to God. So whenever anybody does that, they are, the Bible says, of the evil one, because they're doing what the evil one does. Okay? Cain, and so we're not surprised that in the very first story after Genesis 3, we have what? A picture of the battle between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. Cain represents the seed of the serpent. Abel represents the seed of the woman. Cain is evil. He has an evil heart. And that's why he murders his brother Abel. And even in our own passage, right, it says Abel offered his sacrifice by faith as opposed to Cain, which means that when Cain offered his sacrifice, he didn't offer it by faith. And so this is a reminder, right, that we can do religious activity and yet not have faith. Isn't that crazy? Both of them gave an offering to God, but one offered it with faith and one didn't. I would argue that's the reason why God accepted Abel's offering and not Cain. Because it didn't have to do with the nature of the offering. It had to do with the heart of the offerer.